All right, and welcome to the Brain Dead Podcast, Episode 1, which I'm your host, Joseph,
And I'm John.
and today we're bringing our first ever podcast episode. And in this episode, we will be talking about Godzilla Minus One and our experience and thoughts on the movie. John, would you like to start us off, or would you like me to?
Yes, certainly. So, without giving any spoilers away, Godzilla Minus One follows the story of one Japanese soldier, specifically a kamikaze pilot, um, going into an island and encountering a prototype of Godzilla. Anywho, as the time passes, the monster resurfaces, now all radioactive thanks to the atomic testing in the late 40s. And this particular Godzilla is not like the MonsterVerse Godzilla. He is quite the mean one, and he wants nothing but destruction to everything that stands in his path. And so our characters want to devise a plan to contain him. That's all I will say on the matter. Joe, any thoughts before we get into spoilers?
Uh, I would have to say the movie was a great watch. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend viewing it at your earliest convenience. As you mentioned, the story does follow the kamikaze pilot as we follow his journey from his experience with meeting the Godzilla and how it had mutate over time and caused all the destruction. And I'd say we are good to go into spoilers. As expected, there are going to be some spoilers as this is a our opinions on the movie, and there's a decent amount we would want to cover on the movie that will spoil it. So, John, would you like me to take over from here, or would you like to cover this next section?
You can start ahead with the spoilers.
All right. So, as mentioned, this is following the story of one kamikaze pilot who had gotten cold feet, basically, upon his mission. Landing on the island that to get some repairs, they were actually attacked by an early version of Godzilla that the locals had been familiar with. So instead of the original Godzilla being a mutation caused by radioactivity or anything of that sort, we're actually experiencing one that was already established, as this Godzilla already existed. But as we are following his story, we see how his experience with this monster was and this kaiju. As he slaughtered, as Godzilla went and slaughtered his entire platoon, basically leaving his plane and him alive, along with one other mechanic on that island. But from there, he felt the shame of failure as returning home, his entire home was destroyed by firebombing. And John, would you like to hop on to the next part?
Yes. Picking up from that part, his neighbor, upon realizing he returned alive, calls him a coward. Wondering why he came home alive, and if he wasn't alive, then his parents or her family would still be alive. Um, so he's just sulking around and destroyed Japan. Was, I would say, when Japan surrendered. So he meets this girl. Well, after finding this baby all by herself, and he just stays there in the market, waiting for the mom to come. And then this young girl comes, picks up the baby. The They both basically go with him and start like a little proto family. From there, he gets a job as a ship gunner to destroy mines placed by the Japanese imperial government. And as the years pass, he forgets all about Godzilla. Not without some of the post traumatic stress disorder dreams that he has. But however, after 1947 or so, around there, like the creature reemerges, and he is an unstoppable force of nature, which forces him to kind of get his act together almost. Well, they first tried to get rid of him by basically putting a mine in his mouth, shooting it with a 25 millimeter machine gun, and of course that did the trick. It blew his head off. but it regenerated, and let's just say the Big G was not happy about that. That was until a destroyer came, and he proceeds to rip it apart like it was paper. There he went to basically Tokyo, well, a section of it where his, I want to say, partner was. I don't know. Well, were they partners or something? Because
At this point in the movie, it has been established that there is supposed to be a relationship between the two, though he had not proposed or anything of the sort. But before we continue on to that part, I feel we should discuss a bit more on how we feel about the movie so far, our own opinions and everything. If that's all right with you.
yeah, definitely.
All right, perfect. I'll start this section off by saying, so far, this movie had me honestly captivated with how it looked. The fact that it didn't slowly build us into Godzilla was an amazing change compared to the other movies where we have to wait a bit to actually meet our favorite lizard kaiju. But from there, I honestly got to say, the movie kept a really good pace for how long it was. And honestly, the second half, after he destroyed the destroyer, went back into the ocean, everything leading up to the fact that no one wanted to admit that Godzilla existed, honestly brought such really entertainment to the movie, especially once we got into the half that we're about to go into. But what was your opinion on this?
So far there, yeah, like you said, it had very nice pacing. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel dragged out. Um, and there was a nice mix of like how the human characters were going through their stuff without it feeling so boring. Like you felt actually invested with the characters. And then came the event where the Big G starts stomping around the city, and of course his partner was on a train,
Yep,
which he was on it when he decides to just chomp on it and just swing it around like it was a nunchuck. And which during this time, I just thought, man, how did she survive this? Like, how did she survive it? Like, there was so many points where, in that specific part alone, where it's like, yeah, I can understand how she'll just kick the bucket from there, but no, she's still alive. She's still kicking,
yep,
and then she meets up with her so-called partner in there, and then the moment comes where Godzilla is going to use his atomic breath,
yep. And I do
and the
want to.
visuals and how the build up to it was pretty amazing, like pretty awe-inspired, not inspiring, like it was. You just felt awe and a little nostalgia, was feeling like, ooh, he's gonna shoot his breath,
Yep, and
and then yeah, like I felt like I felt joy, like I was like, yeah, he's gonna do it, he's gonna do it, he's gonna do it. Then it happened. I was like, yeah, I was like, yeah. Oh, oh, yeah. So that was my reaction to the atomic breath. What was your reaction to that?
So during that entire scene of him going through and destroying the city, I do want to circle back to what you said about how did she survive that fall. Based on the height and how tall Godzilla was, I just gotta say plot armor was really strong with her up to the atomic breath because she should not have been able to survive a plummet into the water like that.
I
But
mean, yeah, and she didn't look like she knew how to break the fall. Like
no,
he was like a diver or whatnot. But even then, a diver would just come out pretty harmed and whatnot.
yeah. So for that one, I'm just gonna say plot armor was strong. But once we got to the part with the atomic breath, visually it was amazing. One of the best atomic breaths I've seen to date. But I still gotta say, the scene leading up to that, and I'll just take it from here, just to move on from going over the entire scene of him going around destroying. once he unleashes the atomic breath, the amount of power that his atomic breath had. Because his wasn't just like how all the other Godzillas were, where he just fires and it's just like a straight beam. The second it hits, it caused a eruption, an explosion, a basic bombing, if need to say, that sent debris and everyone flying. In a last-ditch effort to save the soldier, she pushes him into an alley which prevents him from being blown away as well. But because of this, she is presumed lost and dead to the rubble because of this blast. And we presume this because as we go through the rest of the movie, they're searching through the rubble and everything. Authorities are keeping everyone out of it because it's so radioactive from his atomic blast, which is an added detail I like because I don't believe in any of the older Godzilla movies. Those are pointed out that atomic breath would leave any residual radiation.
Mm, I think I remember in with Shin Godzilla, they kind of touched on that a bit, but it was just more of his presence that left radiation. But I could be wrong though. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I'll quote you on it at another date when we potentially talk about Shin Godzilla. But for right now, I like that little add detail that his atomic breath was actually nuclear, which I just love that little detail. But after they've searched the rubble and everything, the reason we do presume that she's passed, we go into a Japanese wake that you would see in normal Japanese movies, stuff like that, where they're honoring the memory of her. The soldier has broken down crying because during the duration of the movie, he has been told repeatedly he should marry this woman. But he never popped a question or anything like that. And the only reason she was down in that part of Japan was because she had gotten a job because she felt she's living with this man for free, and the way he was acting, there was no actual emotions between the two. But because of this presumption that she's dead, he was out for Godzilla's head. Which actually leads us to an interesting part where they actually call upon old soldiers who fought in the war and everything to ask them to lay down their lives because during this time we have the whole conflict between both Russia and the US in the movie where the US can't really help Japan and they acknowledge that they're going to have to fight for themselves because basically they're at a point where they can't do nothing. And because of this, you have people who are willing to die to fight and take down Godzilla. Because the doctor, the scientist that was already there helping develop weapons and everything to fight the US and all that during the war, he devised a plan to defeat Godzilla, which was to drag him down to the deepest parts of the ocean, to basically have the pressure crush him and pull him back up from it. And because of this scene, we get to see the diversity of those who fought in the war, how each one had an ideal that I've done my time. I'm not going to risk my life if this country is not going to do anything for me. And the others who are like, if nothing's going to be done unless I do something, I want to protect my family. And then this leads to a scene that we were not expecting. The return of the last surviving mechanic, who at this point had so much hatred for our soldier that he was never wanted to see him again because he felt like a failure. But because of this, our soldier right now wants to kamikaze. He wants to suicide bomb into Godzilla as a latch-ditch effort. Up to this point, I feel the movie has given us such great character development, given it to the point that I would honestly go see this movie again if I had the chance. Like, this movie was just well-rounded, amazing, and we haven't even gotten to the actual final act, the final battle. What do you have to say so far, though, John, about the movie as a whole?
Uh, well, kind of like what I said about the human character interaction. You're actually invested about what's going on with them. Um, and yeah, the inclusion of the medic, like actually helping them out. You wouldn't think like he'd be down for that because he caused the death of all of his friends, his comrades in that island, and he didn't sacrifice himself when the time came to it. So when he said when our protagonist told the pilot, "Hey, I want you to help me out with a plan," and basically tells him to go kick rocks and whatnot, leaves him in bad shape, and yeah, but he returns, actually helps him out with this prototype plane they were gonna use later in the war, but they didn't get to because you know, little boy and fat man happened. Which anywho, they go through the plan, but they rush it because when they were about to head out, Godzilla is basically spotted at the pier. No, going inland, and they're like, "Oh shoot, we gotta do something about it." So pilot goes and veers him around, brings him back to water. They act out the plan. Surprisingly, with no casualties. Surprisingly, like no one died.
I think there might have been some casualties for those who discovered Godzilla moving inland beforehand. But don't quote me on that because I don't remember exactly if that might have happened. But before this he even reached inland or anything like that, we're actually going over with both the pilot and the mechanic on the plane. And there's some foreshadowing that we're going to go over in a bit of something that was going to happen. But basically, they are he's our pilot, our protagonist. He's ready to sacrifice himself to take this thing down, get revenge, all that. So as he leads him back into the ocean, to the deepest part of the Japanese part of the ocean that he could, the plan works. They are able to submerge him, but it's not enough to take him down. So they go with the second act, which is to raise him up to basically cause all that pressure again to hit him once more. And basically freeze him in a way. But because Godzilla decides he's going to gnaw through all the stuff that's pulling him up, all the airbags and everything, they're at a standstill trying to pull him up physically. The cranes start breaking, everything. Which leads us to another human interaction we had earlier on in the movie on the boat when they were defusing the mines with one of the younger sailors who brings a bunch of tugboats with all the people who had said we're not going to risk our lives for this. If we're basically screwed, we're screwed. But they all came and they tugged Godzilla back out of the ocean. And there he is, standing once again, still kicking, charging up his final atomic breath. In one final heart-wrenching moment, everything slows down for all the sailors as they realize their plan didn't work. This is it. It's over. But then comes in our protagonist with his final chance of redemption, not only for not taking Godzilla down in the beginning, but for his cowardice early on with the war. Flying his plane into Godzilla's mouth, causing the detonation of the bombs that he had, finally defeating our now past Godzilla. But note, while they were going over the instructions on the plane, the mechanic had put in a way for him to eject himself, an ejector seat. So instead of him dying in that fire, in that plane crash, he was ejected and saved the day. Leading us to an end credit scene that I still, that people have been eating more into. We've heard a couple of things on our end where they find the love interest, the woman, and she's alive. She survived. But if you look on her neck, you start seeing a black mark just growing up to her head. And then cutting back to Godzilla reforming himself in the ocean. Now, I felt that was a cutaway to another form of Godzilla media where Godzilla had a connection with someone. It was either Godzilla or Mothra. Don't fully quote me on that. I cannot remember for the life of me. But I do feel that because of this connection, we are going to get a sequel most likely to this, hopefully. But I feel if you get a chance once again, go see the movie if you can. Because this is a amazing movie, great character development. I know we didn't really mention any of the characters' names, as we seen this movie a couple of weeks ago when it first dropped, but we have been a bit busy, so we couldn't really discuss much on it and remember all the names, so we just want to go over this information. But John, do you have anything you want to add to what we've went over?
Yeah. So it's gonna go. I'll circle around back again to like how the love interest has incredible plot armor. Because if you remember the whole blast from Godzilla with his atomic breath, I'm sorry, that was the impact alone should have been enough to just fling her like a good couple hundred feet per second winds, and that should have been enough to just take her out of the count. But no, somehow she's alive.
Yeah, and I just want to point out some of the theories people have been having because of this. Some of the theories that have been pointed out to me and you is chunks of Godzilla were found in the blast zones and everything. So people have been speculating either because of those chunks of Godzilla, they just merged with the people and caused them to regenerate themselves. Another thing that I theorize is even with that blast, she had a very low chance of survival as it was, from what I could tell. So she had a chance of survival even if that blast didn't kill her. My theory is when she got blasted away, she was under the rubble because I have a feeling she should have been able to survive it with a very very low chance of survival. And even if she did, by the time they found her, she probably would have, you know, bled out or passed away from hunger, dehydration, or anything like that. So my theory is there a chance they might have ate pieces of she might have ate a piece of Godzilla to try and survive because she wanted to see her daughter. Thus leading to that whole mark because she is the only one from that whole thing that had survived, to our knowledge.
Interesting, interesting theory. What I would have thought of is like his residual radiation might have given people a chance to actually survive it, survive any disaster, but in turn, they're just gonna get like a very strong cancer like thing going on, as evident by the growing black marks in her on her body, mainly her neck. So either they're gonna die from a super cancer later down the line, or as kind of thought about in the Shin Godzilla movie towards that end, like they'll just turn to some Godzilla humanoid things. Although that is a morbid thing to think about, but that I'll save that for another day, I suppose.
Gotcha. One thing I do want to add on that kind of makes me think that it might just be like you're saying, but I don't think they're gonna die or mutate from it. I'm thinking more like a Deadpool effect. Because remember, Deadpool has a very powerful regeneration healing factor, but it caused him basically turn out how he is. I believe at one point he had some form of cancer that, at least in the movies, he had cancer. That's why he did it, if I'm correct, because he wanted to survive. I can't remember. I do
Hmm.
not remember the Deadpool movies, but that's why I'm thinking something like that could potentially be what they're going for. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see for the sequel. But all in all, I'd have to give this a solid 9 out of 10. It did have its points where I felt it was kind of dragged out, like we didn't need these scenes. Like it didn't really add much to character development or anything like that. And then all in all, it had great pacing. Uh, Honestly, a good soundtrack. Godzilla's design was amazing as we saw him change as the movie went through, little by little.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like and also to kind of point out at least personally, I felt like that Godzilla was kind of like an amalgamation of all the previous Godzillas, like visual wise at least, because there are some aspects of Heisei Godzilla, some of Millennium Godzilla, and some of his past 50 self as well.
Yep. I and while we're on that topic, I also want to bring up the first version of him we see on that island strongly resembles to me the 2000 Zilla movie. The most
That was
frowned
Zilla.
upon. Yeah, it looked very similar to how that Zilla design looked, in my opinion.
Interesting.
But like it was hard to tell because of how dark it was and they were trying to show him. But in my opinion, it kind of resembled a bit of the silhouette for Zilla because of the hunched over status they had and all that.
Right.
But all in all, what would you rate this movie?
I'm actually really like for me personally, 10 out of 10. Like I enjoyed all of it. Personally, I enjoyed all of it. It was a very well done movie. Of course, it had the nuclear anti-nuclear weapon allegory into it. Plus, it felt fresh. It felt like a new thing, but yet it kept with nostalgia at the same time. So it was a nice mix of that, but also at the same time, I all I have to say is the Godzilla roar. That was just 10 out of 10 actually.
Oh yeah, the second they did the roar, cue the meme do the roar, it just fits so well. But I say we covered everything we honestly want to cover with this segment. At this point, I do just want to state we are going to try to do these once a week and get these pushed out. No guarantees, though. We will be discussing stuff like Godzilla, anime, games, basically anything nerdcore, I'd like to say, that we like. Uh, but yeah, John, do you want to add anything on to this before we close on out of here?
Uh, no, I'd say yeah, like Joe said, we're gonna try to do this weekly around 7 p.m. Central Time, and hope you like this podcast, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Yep. And with that said, I want to thank y'all for coming and viewing us, and let's stay brain dead. Thank y'all. Bye.